I would like to welcome everyone to the We Realize Operations webinar series 2016. We'll be doing part 7 today, since it's the month of July, pretty much the last day. And today we'll be talking about alerts and symptoms, which is one of the features of We Realize Operations Manager, but I guess that's the most important feature. And Simon and myself, we decided we should go for this one and discuss and share our experiences around the topic and help you probably build some content within your environments which can help you monitor your infrastructure and the surrounded ecosystem in a better way. So that's the aim of this session. Quickly, some housekeeping items. We'll do question and answers at the end of the session. If you have any questions or which you want to register while you have them fresh in your brain, you can use the chat window and ask those questions. The session is getting recorded like our other 6 sessions which we have done for the entire year so far. So you will be able to review them later on. They will be posted within 24 hours of this session on our blogs. You're on mute as soon as you enter. This helps everybody. People don't get disturbed, etc. If you want to unmute yourself, you can use *6 or you can use the chat window as well. If you have any technical difficulties, you can put them on the chat window or send me an email as well. With that, I will let Simon introduce himself. He's my partner in crime. Simon, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, so my name's Simon. I work for a company called Extrovert. We're a consultancy based in the UK. I work as a senior consultant, specializing mostly in things like VROps, vSphere, and so on. I have a Twitter account at SimonED, and as you can see, my LinkedIn profile there as well. If you ever want to get in touch with me or Sunny, Twitter's a good place. That's me.
Thanks, Simon. Simon has been a partner with me for all the work which we're doing, and I should tell about myself as well. My name is Sunny. I work for VMware, and I write about all I do with my work on my blog, and you can get in touch with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. That's about us. Let's quickly go ahead and look at the agenda. So today we'll be working with VROps or alerts, where we'll talk about what are the different components which make up the alerts, such as symptoms, recommendations, and actions. Then we'll talk about policy and how important or what role does it play in alert management within your environments using VROps. Then we'll talk about best practices, which is kind of a cliche term, but it's basically meeting your requirements with your alerts. Then we'll talk about the alert lifecycle management, where we just not talk about how to generate an alert or what is a better alert to look at, but also what would be the associated actions till the time you start with troubleshooting and end with troubleshooting a particular issue. We'll also look at demo if time permits. I have a lot of slides to cover, a lot of good material. So I would see if I could do a demo, although I'm ready. So if we can extend a little bit, we might want to do a demo as well. I'll try and leave some time for Q&A throughout the presentation, and wherever there's a pause, we will probably try and answer some of the questions from the chat window. All right, let's start with the alert components and terminology. So if you look at an alert today in VROps, it has changed with VROps 6.0. With VROps 6.0, we just had an alert based on a single threshold, and that was called a threshold-based alert. You couldn't do much in terms of comparative analysis or correlation between different metrics to go ahead and create an alert. However, things changed when VROps 6.0 was released, and since that, it has been enhanced over a period of time. And you basically have symptoms, recommendations, and actions which make up an alert. Along with that alert definition, you also get notifications, which basically utilizes the REST API within VROps. And this REST API is used by ecosystem partners and vendors to go ahead and send event notifications directly into VROps Alerts. Today we'll focus on alert definitions and its components, and in one of our future sessions where we talk about API, maybe we'll cover notifications as well. A lot of text on this screen. I will not go through all of that, but I will probably go through this. So alerts basically can be configured either with a single symptom or multiple symptoms. And you do have an option to do conditional formatting in terms of whether you want all the symptoms to be true or you want a specific symptom to be true. So that's where symptoms come into picture. And that's where you decide whether you want an alert to have multiple symptoms or just have a single symptom. And what it helps you with is to go ahead and detect or remove false positives, which can sometimes in a data center cause a lot of alerting, and people call it alert storms or flood or noise in different terminologies in different regions, I would say. So in order to make sure that you have a genuine alert which is actionable, it's important that you have the right set of symptoms which creates that alert and which basically go ahead and trigger the alert based on whether the symptom is true or not true. How do they work? So if you look at a framework of an alert, it basically triggers using symptoms, and these triggered symptoms trigger an alert. And within an alert, you can actually go ahead and look at recommendations which are relevant to those symptoms. And then if you want, you will be able to either do manual actions or automated actions using the automated action framework of VROps. It does not do all the actions in the world, but it has a bunch of actions available. So if you look at the bottom graphic in the screen, you can see these conditions which are basically translated into symptoms are in most of the cases either a metric, so it could be CPU usage, memory usage, it could be contention percentage on CPU, it could be contention on memory, it could be IOPS, it could be latency, it could be network packet drops, so on and so forth, if it's a metric. It could be a property as well, so you can use properties to create a symptom, which basically means that it could be a Windows VM or it could be a Linux VM. It could be a VM which is under cluster X, or it could be a VM which is on data store Y, wherein you can use the properties of a virtual machine or a particular object to define a specific symptom. And then the third and the most important, and the one which I like, is an event-based symptom, which basically means that any events which are happening in your data center can be piped into the system, or if they're available to the system through any of the management packs, then you can use them to create your own symptoms. And this is what basically has an edge above the threshold or metric-based symptoms, which are basically either 0 or 1 or basically are on number-based. The event-based symptoms are more intelligent because they're talking about what's happening in your data center, and you can take multiple event-based symptoms to go ahead and create a real-life situation where you might want to have an alert even before a problem happens in your data center. That's why I like that one. But yeah, you can have a combination of metric, property, and event-based symptoms into a single alert as you see over here. And within that alert, then you can have recommendations which are nothing but, let's say, a KB article or steps to solve a particular problem. And those recommendations is something which your operations guy who has received that alert would look at and go ahead and take an action. Now that action could be manual actions, or you can also leverage actions which are available within the system. So for instance, actions like powering on a virtual machine or powering off a virtual machine, adding CPUs, adding memory. Simon and myself did a session on automated action frameworks. So if you go back and track the history of the series, you will see that part number 1 was about self-healing data centers, where we actually leveraged these actions. That's a good starting point for you if you want to learn more about automated actions. Here's another example, right, just to put things in perspective. You could have different conditions within your data center around CPU. You can have a CPU stress, which is over 70% for 12 cycles. You could have CPU demand over 95% for 5 cycles and CPU usage over 75% for 3 cycles. Now, each of these metrics is basically measured every 5 minutes or calculated every 5 minutes by VROps. And that 5 minutes is actually one cycle. So when we say 12 cycles, it is 12 into 5, which is 60 minutes. So if your CPU stress has been over 70% for continuously for 60 minutes, then your symptom, which is high VM CPU stress, will automatically become true. Similarly, there are other two examples over here which will derive or which will go ahead and make a symptom true, positive or negative, depending upon the condition on which you are driving those symptoms. If one or all of those symptoms are true, and that's something which you can definitely configure within the system, then I would want to go ahead and alert about virtual machines CPU capacity. And a simple recommendation could be that we need to add more vCPUs to this virtual machine because the amount of vCPUs it has is not sufficing the requirement of the workload. And then there could be an action which can be triggered either manually or by VROps automatically to add vCPUs. And this is something which we demonstrated pretty well in the first session where we added CPUs on a running virtual machine using hot add. And this is how a basic alert flow would work. So this is very, very, very simple or very basic. You can have multiple different combinations by which you can make alerts, and they can be very specific and intelligent to your infrastructure. Now, let's talk more in detail about symptoms, right? So if you look at a symptom from previous two slides, you clearly understand that there are the lowest common denominator over here. Right? They're the ones who actually go out in your data center, figure out what's happening at metric level, event level, and then they can combine or come up together in order to make an alert definition. So things like CPU ready, data store latency, changes such as shared decreased, which is an event clearly, or fault events such as host has been disconnected, or host is powered off, or a VM is powered off. All these can basically go ahead and create or become a symptom. So you can have thousands and thousands of different symptoms, and they can all converge into, let's say, only 100 alerts. So it all depends upon how you shape up your alert or how you use the out-of-the-box alerts. A symptom is a simple condition test. It can be a badge, it can be metric or supermetric, it can be object property, change event, or a fault. So I do want to pause here and talk about supermetric over here, which is pretty strong and pretty powerful, right? We know that we can create supermetrics from our last session where we talked about supermetrics. Now, if you want, you can actually use those supermetrics to create symptoms and then further create alerts of your own choice, which basically not only allows you to use what is available out of the box, but also allows you to create customized metrics on the basis of which you can alert within your data center, which means that you can solve or get alerted on specific issues which are happening in your environment and might not be a common knowledge across different infrastructures or environments of VMware. Again, it's not limited to VMware. You can have it across the ecosystem of whatever you're monitoring through VROps. They can be applied to different resource kinds, as I mentioned. So what you see here is host, VM data store, etc. But if you want, it can be on NSX, it can be on vSAN, it can be on HP 3-part storage, it can be on Oracle databases, it can be on SAP applications, etc. Depending upon what all you monitor through your VROps infrastructure and what all metrics you have in your system, metrics and events. And using those, you can create any of the symptoms. You can do comparisons. You can also create dynamic threshold-based symptoms if you want to, which is pretty powerful, because then you would only alert if you hit into a zone of anomaly or abnormal behavior. And that's where dynamic thresholds help you rather than having static thresholds. You can have different criticality levels. It can be an info, warning, immediate, or critical out of the box. So that's how symptoms are laid out. I mean, if you look at this particular screen, you can see that you have incoming data, which the analytical engine is capturing every 5 minutes, and then there are symptom definitions which you have defined, which go as an input to that analytical data. And if there is a match of a symptom definition to the incoming data, it will automatically go ahead and generate that symptom. And those symptoms will then be either available, in fact, will be available for you to alert, as well as will be available to impact the badges on the VROps UI itself. So it all depends upon how you have defined those symptoms and what data you are collecting on top of that. This is a simple workflow of a symptom. This is how it looks like in the UI. So if you go under content within VROps, which is this small icon, if you can see my mouse pointer, then you will be able to define symptom definitions. And within symptom definitions, you can define 5 different types of symptom definitions, which is absolutely awesome, because you're not just stuck with the normal metrics and supermetrics, not even supermetrics for that matter, but normal metrics, which some of the other products in the market gives you, but you can also work with properties, message events, fault events, and metric events, which basically means that you can cover mostly everything what you have or what's happening in your environment by using symptoms and then use them to alert in your infrastructure. We will probably try and do a demo to see if we can create some of these when we go through the demo section. Again, as I mentioned before, you have metric, supermetric, property, message events, roles, and metric events. They all can be used to create symptoms. You can have event or symptoms created automatically as soon as you install a third-party management pack as well. So let's say if you install, for instance, HP 3PAR management pack or EMC ESA management pack, you will automatically have symptoms added by those vendors in your VROps instance, which they leverage later on for either alerts or changing bad scores or dashboards, etc. So that's how the entire ecosystem contributes to your VROps instance and can help you monitor the entire data center and not just the vSphere infrastructure. All right, so once you have symptoms, you can basically use them to create an alert. And if you look at alert or the content related to alert, it is all very strategically placed in a single place in the UI. So if you go into the content tab, which is our focus today, then you will be able to look at alert definitions, symptom definitions, actions, recommendations, and notifications all at the same place. And this is where you can basically go ahead and edit any of those and start creating new or start editing the existing ones or deleting them, etc. So that's where you can basically go ahead and do all your work around new symptoms or existing alerts or existing recommendations. Just a quick example of when you create an alert, what goes into it, right? So I'll just run you through the 10-12 steps which are involved. And the good news is that once you've created an alert once, you can export it and import it whenever you want in different environments as and when you like. So if you look at over here on screen number 1 or the screenshot number 1, you can see that we basically go ahead and give a name to the alert, and then we give it a description. There should be a friendly name and a friendly description so that you easily understand what this alert is all about. Then you go ahead and select the base object on which the alert would be triggered. So here is where you get all the objects which are available or which VROps is monitoring. The good news is that this is not limited to the vCenter objects, but you will also have objects around your third-party management packs. Could be NSX, HP, 3PAR, Cisco, SAP, Oracle, anything. And you'll have all those objects available here. Once you select an object, you basically get to choose that what would be the impact of that particular alert. Whether it will be a health alert, a risk alert, an efficiency alert, whether it will be symptom-based in terms of criticality, or do you want to define whether it's a warning, info, critical, etc. So if it's symptom-based, it's more intelligent because if your symptom is warning, the alert would be a warning. If your symptom is critical, your alert automatically becomes critical. So imagine a situation where you have 4 symptoms within an alert and all are monitoring CPU contention. If CPU contention is 1%, give me a warning symptom. If CPU contention is 5%, give me an immediate symptom. And if CPU contention goes to 10%, then is when you give me a warning symptom. A critical symptom. And when you do all of these, it will automatically converge into an alert, which is symptom-based, and hence, whatever the symptom is, the alert criticality would be exactly the same. So in case if it's a critical, because 10% CPU contention has been seen on a VM, then your alert automatically becomes a critical alert. Once you've done that, you basically go to step number 4, where you add the symptom definitions, which I was just explaining to you. So if you have your contention-based symptoms, CPU contention 10%, 5%, 2%, you will all have them over here. And you can basically have metric properties or any different type of symptoms which you have configured. You can filter, you can search, you can also choose relations in terms of where those symptoms are available, which is very, very powerful, which basically means that I could be a cluster alerting if a virtual machine in that cluster goes down, which is powerful. So if 50% of my virtual machines are experiencing high CPU usage, then I will create an alert on the cluster saying that this cluster is experiencing high CPU usage. Then you can actually do events which are populated or which are on a population rather than a single object at all given point of time. So that's where the defined on or self, children, or relationship basically helps. And then you just go ahead and drag the symptoms from the left-hand window to the right-hand window and go ahead and create or add symptoms to a particular alert definition. Now, you do have an option at the same time to add multiple symptoms with an and or all relationship, which basically means that you're saying that when all the conditions are true, then alert, or when any of these conditions are true, you alert. So you can choose between what you want with multiple symptom alerts. And once you've done that, you get to the step number 5, which is on the screenshot, to add recommendations. Similar to symptoms, you have recommendations which are available out of the box. You can also create your own. So you can say that if there is an alert on the EMC storage, then go ahead and call John on number 902, because John is the guy who knows things about EMC storage and nobody else does. Or you can have things like VMware KB articles or your own blogs or your own intranet pages where you have resolutions to known problems. And all those can go into recommendations. I would highly recommend that you customize your recommendations based on your environment so that you get to the solution of the problem as soon as possible and hence reduce the mean time to resolve a particular problem. That's where you do recommendations. And again, as soon as you're done, you basically have your alert definition, which is right on the top. Then you have all the symptoms with different conditions set if you have created different multiple symptoms alert. And then you have your recommendation all ready to go. If you notice, you do have actions over here as well. So in this example, if there is a VM CPU stress alert which comes up because the VM CPU stress is at a critical level, the recommendation by the system would be to add more CPU capacity for this virtual machine, and you can see an action over there, which is to set CPU count for VM. So you do have an opportunity here to go ahead and do an automated action to set that CPU count if you wish to. Quickly, a summary of recommendations and actions. So recommendations are displayed within the alert. They're used to provide guidance on how to fix alerts based on tribal knowledge, best practices, KBs, etc. They're built in by or out of the box or third party in most of the cases when you install management packs, but you have absolutely your own choice to create your own. It can be a single line of text or can be a complex set of instructions if you want to have them. And the order of the recommendations are listed inside the alert definitions define their priority as well. So if you're adding, let's say, 5 different recommendations, then the order you add them is how they will be listed in the alert as well, which basically means that people can action them accordingly. Last but not the least, the recommendation can be paired with an automated action using the Python action available out of the box. So you can use that, or you can have manual actions as well. So at this point of time, I will probably take a pause and ask my buddy if there are any questions which have been asked.
We haven't had any questions just yet. It's all good so far, I think.
Fantastic. All right. So I would continue. I'll continue and save some time. All right. So how do you create recommendations? It's as simple as how we created actions. How we created symptom definitions and alerts. You just go ahead into the recommendation box and click on the plus sign to add a new recommendation. So you just go ahead and enter the recommendation in form of a normal text, or you can also create a hyperlink if you wish to, in terms of having links within your system. That's a pretty handy feature, because then people can just click on those links and get to a KB article immediately and start troubleshooting a particular problem. You also have options to do automated action, as I said before. So you can do things like delete powered off VM, or delete unused snapshots, delete unused snapshots for a virtual machine, and so on and so forth. If you want, and if you have the framework, then you can build your own Python actions as well. And we do speak about, and Simon actually does a great job talking about that in the first session, which we did in January. So do review that if you want to learn more about actions. But here you go. So policy-based alert management. Now, if you know everything about alerts, what we just spoke about, but if you don't know about how to control those alerts through policies, then trust me, you will be in trouble. Without knowing how to control and manage these alerts, I have seen people getting fed up of alerts, whether it's VROps or other systems available to monitor infrastructures or applications. If you do not know how to control and tune the alerts based on your infrastructure, then there would be a day when you will shut down everything and stop worrying about those alerts anymore, and just wait for a real disaster to happen before you could action or try to solve problems. So if you want to learn about policies, there are a lot of content available out there. But if you want to look at a demo and how things are done in real world, then you can go ahead and look at our session 2, which we did in Feb, which has details around how to maneuver and play with policies.
I'll just jump in there very quickly, mate, on that.
Yep, fine.
It's really important what Sonny's talking about there. Probably one of the most asked questions I have if I'm on client sites is, while VROps can be quite intelligent with dynamic thresholds, they're still getting lots of alerts that they don't want to have on sections of their estate. And you might be using custom groups with custom policies, but policies is where it's at. You can switch off alert types. You can do different types of things within the policies. So yeah, absolutely, that is your port of call if you want to get the most out of VROps. Get your policies right, and everything else will work nicely for you.
Yep, can't stress enough on that. And on that, let's see what all policy can do for you from an alert management perspective. It's the secret sauce. This is the control center for all the alerts. It's actually the control center for everything in your VROps infrastructure. So it's important that you understand and know policies. You can override symptom values here. So if you have a situation where for a specific set of virtual machines you want to override a symptom and say, oh no, 50% usage is fine. Uh, for these set of virtual machines in this group, I want 75% usage is when I want to get alerted. You can do that, and you can override that within the policy. You can disable, enable, or inherit alerts. This is the first thing which I do. When I deploy VROps in a new environment, I go and disable everything. I disable all the alerts is where I start from. And you would be surprised because not many people do that, but that's my recommendation to customers. I go and disable everything, and then I say, okay, let's go ahead and select what are your monitoring requirements, and based on that, what are the alerts which you need out of the box, and what are the alerts which we think are required to be customized manually for your specific business requirements. So whenever you're setting up monitoring, always make sure that, like everything else when you do design, you tie it back to business requirements and technical requirements so that it makes sense at the end of the day and these alerts become actionable. You can associate alerts to specific objects in a group using policies, something which we spoke about before. So if you want an alert not for the entire population but for specific population or specific objects, you can simply add those objects in a group and have a new policy altogether in which you will enable only these specific alerts and attach that policy to the object. So yep, you should know how to use policy. Alerts can get wild if you do not understand policy. So please watch this video. So whenever you have an opportunity, make sure you watch this video and learn and understand how to control alerts before you start turning on everything. I have a recommendation from some of these slides which I got from Peter Timbo. I do want to call him out. He's a PSO person from VMware. And he mentions in one of his pointers that when he starts an engagement, he deploys everything and then he deletes all the alerts to begin with because they might be all messed up alerts to begin with because there are too many events happening in the data center. And then he goes ahead and enables what he needs. And when I say delete, I'm talking about deleting triggered alerts and not the alert definitions. So do keep and make a note of that. Do not delete alert definitions. Just delete any triggered alerts to begin with, and then you can configure your email notifications and so on and so forth. So how do you play in policy? This is pretty simple. As soon as you edit a monitoring policy, which you have in your system, and you go into alert and symptom definitions, which is the option number 6, this is where you can play around with alert definitions where you can set a state of an alert to either be active or inactive, and you can also look at symptom definitions in the same place and disable, or not disable, but basically, yeah, you can disable symptoms or override symptoms over here, which are participating in a specific alert, which basically helps you to define which alerts will be enabled on which object within which policy. It can get a little trivial, but the good news is that once you configure it the first time, you can export it and keep it and make sure that you have a backup copy of your policy, which can help you every time you need to go ahead and import that somewhere else in other system or rebuild an existing system. So as a consultant, my job becomes really easy because if I have a specific set of best practices which are a common alerts which are required for mostly every vSphere installation at least, then I have them prepackaged, kept with me. I just go on site and import that policy and all that content is automatically built. And I can then start alerting or start with those basics and then build on top of that with the specific customer requirements. So handy for customers and also handy for consultants like me and Simon. So configure your alerts, very important. Out-of-the-box alert could be overwhelming, right? So make sure that you disable what is non-actionable within the policy. So it's very, very important to know what is actionable and disable everything else. If you get too many alerts, it'll become noise. So if you really want people or your operations teams to use VROps in an efficient way and basically make use of your investments in the product. It could be VROps or any other product for that matter. This is a generic operations 101. Reduce noise for them. If you give them too much noise, they will stop looking at things and move away. So while you want intelligent alerts and you want alert to be alerted for everything under the sun, it's important that those alerts make some sense to the person who will work on them from an action point of view. It should not be an alert which comes, he looks at it every day, and then he says, oh, I can't do much if the CPU usage has gone to 75% for 10 minutes and then it has dropped down. Is it actionable? In most of the cases, not. So make sure that your alerts are actionable. Make them better again. Use the starter packs, which I will discuss. So this is something which I was just talking about. I'll be happy to share some of the basic alerts which I configure for customers through my blog and through Simon's blog, probably within next week. And you should be able to use them by just importing them in your environments and enabling them in the policy. If alerts are non-actionable, then it's not necessary that you delete them or don't look at them at all. You still have an option to go ahead and probably put them in a specific policy where they're enabled but not triggered, and you can have them in dashboards or reports if you still want to look at those specific metrics and you think they are important to you. So they might not be created as alerts, but might be a heat map which talks about how your capacity utilization is, and not probably sending it to somebody's mailbox as an alert. Management packs come with alerts. Most of them, I've seen a couple of them which don't, which is quite surprising because what would be, it'll not be useful enough if it doesn't have alerts. But yeah, in most of the cases, you will get, as soon as you install the management pack, whether it's NSX, or whether it's HP, or whether it's EMC, or Cisco, or Blue Medora, as soon as you install these management packs, they will automatically enable these alerts in your default policy. That's a challenge. I don't like that, to be honest. So what I do usually is I go ahead and disable them again, follow the old mantra, and then go ahead and enable what I need and just keep everything else disabled to reduce that clutter which it might create. Never use out-of-the-box alert content. It does not mean that it's crap. It basically means that everything which is out of the box is created by a vendor and might change when you do upgrades, which is my next point, I believe. Out of the box might change when you do upgrade, so make sure, make it a practice. Just like policies, just like everything else, any content which you use within VROps, you should clone it and make it your own with your own naming convention, so that tomorrow if VMware or a management pack provider decides to upgrade and remove some content or deprecate some content or upgrade some content, then it will not impact what you're using on day-to-day basis within your operations team. Simon, you want to comment on that? Have you seen horror stories about that?
Yeah, that's very important. If you're going to choose to modify an alert or a policy or anything for that matter in VROps that is pertinent to your environment, absolutely make a copy of it and label it accordingly. Because as Sunny says, if the management pack is getting an upgrade or VROps is getting an upgrade, there is that chance or possibility it will get overwritten. So if you're just using the one that's there in existence without cloning it, you might lose all of that hard-earned work that you've been doing, which, yeah, that's not so fun. So that's absolutely important.
Yep. Thanks for that, Simon. All right, so reduce the alert level. So this, I have had different opinions on this. So if you look at VMware, out of the box, it gives you 4 alert levels. It gives you info, warning, immediate, and critical. So your info might be 70%, warning might be 80, critical or immediate might be 85, and critical might be 90, for instance, for a particular metric or symptoms. What it basically does is if you enable your alerts to trigger on all these different levels, then you will probably end up with more alerts. I usually tell customers to limit themselves to warning and critical. The warning is their first alarm and their first line of defense, and critical is where they need to take an action. It's your choice, but general thing, recommendation, just have 2 levels. That will reduce the number of alerts, and whatever you get becomes important for you to troubleshoot on as well. So that then you can focus and fix those issues rather than look at 4 different alerts for a single object and then figure out that you've not taken action on any of them because there were too many of those alerts. Use multi-symptom alerts. Cannot stress more to negate false positives. So things like my CPU usage is high is the most crappiest alert I've ever seen. So if somebody's saying I have CPU workload of 90% and you alert on that, let's say on a virtual machine or a ESX server, yes, it is 90%, but doesn't mean that there is a problem. Yes, it could be 100%, but doesn't mean there is a problem. But if you have a CPU workload of 90%, while your contention on that particular virtual machine is 20%, then is when there is a problem, because I'm asking for more but I'm not getting it. And that contention will cause slowness in the virtual machine. So I would want an alert in that situation rather than the first situation where my utilization is 90%. So make intelligent decisions when you enable alerts and think about the entire life cycle in terms of, okay, if I know my CPU usage has gone to 90%, what next? What will I do? If you think, or if the answer is that you cannot do anything, then basically don't have that alert. Think about adding multiple situations or symptoms.
That's really important. One thing to add to that is don't forget that you've got cycles. So as Sunny rightly said, CPU usage, it might be that you have a database running an indexing job and CPU levels are correctly high, but perhaps you're aware or you're being very specific on your monitoring for that box and you don't want it to overrun on its indexing job for, let's say, an hour or 2. You can set it so that it will alert you after 2 hours worth of CPU usage, because it might be that you want to run a backup job next, and if if it's still doing the indexing and then it's going to kick off the backup job, you want to know about that. So you can be very, very specific. I mean, I know that's a very niche use, but that's one way of looking at it.
Yep, absolutely. And last but not the least, start using them now. So if you have stopped using alerts because there were too many in your system, then hopefully we've given you some dope in terms of how you can control them and tame them and make sure you get what you need at the end of the day. So some of the other best practices, apart from the text which I just gave you, is use symptom-based, as I told you before, instead of using a specific level. So if your symptoms have different indicators of being information, warning, immediate, or critical, then use them and have the alert definition as symptom-based. Make sure you have the right category. That's very important for alert types and subtypes, because you want to give as much information as possible to the admin who's troubleshooting a problem after looking at that alert, because that's his touch point to VROps. That's his touch point to the problem. That is his touch point to the entire issue, which may or be happening right now or may happen in a pretty quick time because you've set up alerts which are predictive or proactive in nature. So it's important that you provide him information, whether it's hardware related or storage related, network related, etc., whether it's taking availability down, whether it's taking causing performance issues, and so on and so forth. So make sure that you have them right. VMware gives you them out of the box. We do not allow to add any new types or subtypes because we think that this list is sufficient. But if you want, you can have your naming conventions denote if you have a corner case scenario which you want to show. And as I mentioned, as Simon mentioned about wait cycles and cancel cycles, these are very, very important. I've seen people set up wait cycles for one on a CPU contention for 10%. Yes, it can hit 10% at a given point of time. CPU ready can go high or CPU cold stop can go high in different situations. But one cycle might not be enough for you to judge if it's just a blip or whether it's an actual performance issue which might be happening in your environment. So it's important that you have right wait cycles and right cancel cycles for your alert. Now, one thing which I want to highlight here is if you have set up wait cycles and cancel cycles for your symptoms, then your alert wait cycles and cancel cycles should be one itself, because your symptom will wait for 15 minutes before it triggers. And when it triggers, you want your alert to trigger at that point of time because you've already taken care of the wait time which you wanted to wait for before alerting on that particular symptom. So, yeah, make sure you take care of that. Then comes the limit the alerts customers get out of the box. So, of course, you make sure that you do not have all the alerts available. You override them or disable them. And this is a screenshot where you can override a particular threshold if you want to within symptom definitions in a policy, which I showed you earlier. You can override from 1 as a standard value to 2 just by clicking on the condition and changing it from default to override. And then you will get this pop-up where you can go ahead and change the threshold from 1 to 2 or to 3, depending upon what kind of a symptom definition you're dealing with. All this is possible from policy itself. Alert lifecycle management, very important as we come to close of this session. In another 10 minutes, I want to spend some time over here. Alert definitely should not die in a mailbox or a GUI. I mean, if your final destination is that somebody would be eyeballing those alerts on a dashboard in a NOC, or they will go to someone's email and you assume that they will take care of them by default, then trust me, that doesn't happen every day. You're not motivated to reply to every email within 1 minute of when you get it, especially when it goes to an email box, right? Alerts is something which you want people to action on. And if you want them to be actionable, you need to tie them to a ticketing system. You may or may not have an expensive ticketing system like ServiceNow, but there are alternatives which are available which allow you to go ahead and associate SLAs to a particular alert or an incident and have ownership defined so that your admins take the ownership of those tickets or alerts, are accountable if they do not solve a problem within a particular SLA, given that it can be solved within that point of time or that period of time. Or they basically, let's say, open a case with VMware support to get help from there. So all this is very important because just having an alert does not make sense. If you have an alert which is actionable, which is accountable, and at the end of the day, which can be recorded in a system, which could be a service desk system, then is when it will start making sense, because then you can trend in terms of how many such incidents have happened in the past. Is there an underlying brewing problem within your data center? Could be a heat issue, could be a shelf or storage shelf issue, could be an issue with a series of firmware which you have deployed on your servers, which is causing these alerts day in, day out and causing incidents in your data center. So very important. And this basically helps you to reduce your mean time to resolution as well, because you would know your history of your data centers, and if you would know what kind of problems are happening, and if you have gone through a situation before, you would have a ready answer or a resolution for that as well. Create internal KDs for them. So if you have ready answers, make sure you document them on an internal KB or a blog post, and then add them into recommendations. Right? If you add them into recommendations, then your NTTR goes down automatically. And here are the things which you can do with the alerts, which is the last screenshot that you see here. So as you generate alerts, right, they have to go out of the system somewhere so that they can live this life cycle which I just spoke about. So you can do an automated action plugin. So you can basically have an action associated to an alert, which will go ahead and add CPU disk, memory, power on a VM, power off a VM, or you can do your own custom actions. So that's one thing. The second is a log file plugin, which is used by some of the customers I have worked with, and they basically go ahead and log the alerts in form of text files in a local on the local VROps system itself. So they create a partition on a local VROps by adding a small disk, 1 GB or 2 GB, and then they log these alert files onto this partition. And from there, they use different protocols, different scripting methodologies such as Python or Shell, and use that to forward these alerts to, let's say, a ServiceNow or a Netcool or a CA kind of a tool where there could be correlations and there could be ticketing systems which you can utilize with a log file. So that's one cool use case, and it works really well. You can do SAM notification plugins. So if you're using smart systems, then you can use that. You can do REST API notification plugins. So if there are systems which support incoming REST calls, which you can use and send alerts to directly. That could be one integration which you can do, let's say, between VROps and ServiceNow, for that matter, through REST notifications. You can use network share plugins, so you can log these alerts in a network shared drive on a NAS mount, and so on and so forth. You can email them if you want to, and which is the most simpler form and the most popular form, I believe. Although I don't trust it completely because emails get lost in your mailbox. And the last one is an SNMP trap plugin. So if you want to send an SMS, you want to send your alert to a messaging system using an SNMP trap, from where it can send out SMSs to your big bosses about the alerts, then all that is possible. But it's important that you choose these and not just let the alerts die within VROps, because if you don't action them, then you are not really using the real value of the product. Alert archival. So like anything else, alert is also data and content, and you have an option to archive them. So by default, it's 90 days. So if you go into administration global settings, you will get this page. And here you can define that for how many days you want an alert, whether active or inactive, to stay in your system. And after that, it's archived. Basically, when I say archive, it's deleted permanently out of the system. So 90 days is by default. So if your alert retention policy is more than 90 days, then you can increase that number. I don't remember at the top of my head what's the maximum, but yeah, you can put a crazy number there and it will automatically tell you what's the maximum you can do. So that's where you do alert archival. I have other set of customers or other set of people who ask me that, oh, you know, I started with this crazy alert journey and I had all these alerts and now I have 30,000 alerts in my VROps. I want to start afresh. I want to delete all of them and start afresh. You can do that by changing the alert retention policies to 10 days of a minimum, but you will still have your last 10 days worth of alerts. If you really want to go down to zero and get rid of everything, then you can follow the VMware KB, which is pretty cool and basically allows you to go into the Postgres database within your VROps appliance, and you have to do it on each appliance if you have more than one in a cluster configuration, and go ahead and truncate the alert tables, and that will help you to basically get rid of these alerts immediately as soon as you truncate or run those commands or using SSH. One caution, take snapshots before you do that. Make sure you have backups. Make sure you know how to work with command line. So these are some few basic things that you need to know about. Finally, I have those startup packs which I was talking about. So here are a few alerts which I basically set up for host system, for ESX servers. I will put them in a blog post and put them as downloadable XML files so you can download them and use them. If you notice, I have put an underscore in front of them and I'm calling them host system : and then the name of the alert. This basically helps me identify my custom alerts within the set of 400, 500 alerts which I might have in my system. So if I want to play around with them in the policy or if I want to search for them quickly in the alert definition windows, I know I need to type in underscore host system and I'll get all my ESX server alerts. Similarly, I have a few data store alerts which I recommend you to have on day number 1 because these are the ones which are mostly or are the lowest common denominator, let's say. And similarly, I have virtual machines or cluster alerts. And if you notice, then most of these alerts which I'm using or I'm recommending are multiple symptom alerts, which basically means that they will only trigger if there is a real problem which is about to happen or happening, and not in situations where you have used high amount of capacity. The other thing which I wanted to touch upon at this point as well is, like alerts, you should also clone your symptoms, recommendations, and dashboards and everything else what you're doing. So any content which you want to use from the out of the box, you always clone it, and that also is applicable on symptoms. So do that. As I mentioned, I will put out a blog post next week sometime. Don't quote me on it, but yeah, before next Sunday on VExpress, which is my blog, and you should be able to download some of these out-of-the-box alerts in terms of XML files. It's very simple and very easy to import. Okay, time for a demo. I'm right on the money at 2:30 p.m. here in Singapore. Let's see if we have questions at this moment, and if we do not have questions, we can probably spend 5 minutes on the demo. So
We had,
I would hand it to my buddy.
yeah, we had just one question through which I answered, but I'll field it to yourself as well. So how does VROps handle if you decide to cancel a stress-based symptom or alert? Essentially what I replied was that, if you're going to cancel an alert but the condition or the stress or the issue is still true, then it's only going to come back, even if it's going to come back after a couple of days because a particular condition has been and gone. Just cancelling the alert doesn't make the issue go away. How would you advise on that, Sunny?
I think your point was absolutely correct, right? I mean, if you cancel an alert yourself, and you might have to cancel some of the fault event alerts yourself because they do not go automatically. In such situations, you need to make sure that you solve the underlying problem, because the first time you set the alert was to make sure that you know about problems. And if you've known that a virtual machine is in stress, then there are two things which you can do. One is that either you're too aggressive on measuring stress, which is usually 70% for 60 continuous minutes. Sometimes I recommend to bump it up to 80 or 90% and probably go for a higher amount of time for stress to be measured. So that's what I do in most of my cases, unless it's a business critical workload where I really want to know about stress with 60 minutes for 70%. Having said that, the second option is to go ahead and fix the problem, which basically means if a virtual machine is stressed out, it's using high amount of resources, and you really don't want it to get stressed because it's a business critical virtual machine, then you give it more resources by adding CPU or memory. So yeah, you solve the underlying problem and do not worry about just canceling the alert and not getting it anymore. If you don't need that alert at day number 1, then as we mentioned before, just disable it.
Just had some clarity on the question. It was more with regards to how does VROps handle the automatic cancellation of alerts. So obviously you have the wait cycle and the cancel cycle. So do you want to cover that?
Yep. Yep, absolutely. So as we showed you in some of the slides that you can set up wait cycles and cancel cycles for metric-based alerts, right? Just for the metric-based alerts, it uses wait cycles, which is a collection interval of 5 minutes is equal to one wait cycle, and similarly cancel cycles. So if CPU contention hits 20% for next 15 minutes, which is 3 cycles continuously, then the alert would be triggered, and it will be positive and active. Now, if your cancel cycle is 1, or let's say 2, in that case, it will see if the CPU contention goes below 20% and remains below 20% for the next 10 minutes because your cancel cycle is 2. As soon as it sees that, it will basically make the alert, the symptom inactive, which will automatically make the alert inactive or disable it. But if it happens after 30 minutes again, you will get a new alert altogether, and that will again follow the same wait cycle and cancel cycle. Having said that, if you have fault events, for instance, a host goes down, or a HA event has happened, or a memory sensor has failed, or a fan has failed, then fault events do not get cancelled automatically. So fault events do not get cancelled automatically, hence fault alerts do not get cancelled automatically. Not only fault, but there are a few other alerts which do not get cancelled automatically, and the reason behind that is that, for instance, there was a memory sensor failure at 2 a.m. in the night when nobody was looking at alerts or monitoring alert queue. And you come back in the morning, that problem has self-corrected for a period of time, but you know that there is an underlying brewing issue. Then you do want to know about that at 9 a.m. in the morning, and then take an action by calling the hardware vendor and telling him that, you know, could be a problem with the memory card. Why don't you run a diagnostic and see? But if that alert cancels automatically at night, then you would not even notice it next morning. So that phase, it's important that we understand that why some alerts do not get canceled automatically. It can be frustrating sometimes because you'd want them to be, but trust me, if you have set the right alerts and followed some of the advices which we have given to you today, then you will always or automatically understand what's the importance of having alerts active even when the problem might have solved automatically, because at a given point of time that might be indicating towards a proactive or a problem which a bigger disaster which might happen in the near future. Hope that answers the question.
That's great, mate. Thank you.
Right, awesome. So, yeah, I can see Anuj Gupta, that's my buddy from India. Good to have you, Anuj. Good to have you. Thank you. All right, so with that, I'm on the thank you slide. So I guess we pretty much covered. Do we still have people hanging around for a demo? I do see a number of people out here. So if you guys want to see a demo,
yeah, we do.
Okay, let me spend 4 more minutes on a demo. So I'll not spend much time because I am on a project today. So here's my lab, which is running on vSAN, and I'm not sure if it's running. Let me just quickly check. I can talk to this. 3 Octo. Yeah, so this is running somewhere in Washington, D.C., and I'm sitting in Singapore. So I don't know how promising this would be, given that the owner of the lab doesn't know I'm using it. Okay, something happened. So I would just go ahead and log in with my admin account. And I would basically try to give you a quick tour of alerts and also probably show you the packages which I was talking about. So here are my alert packages which I have created for, which I use basically. So I have 26 host system alerts, which include some of the NSX alerts as well. 5 data store, virtual machine, cluster alerts, and so on and so forth, specific alerts for NSX using the NSX management pack. I generally recommend customers to use the vCenter solution, self-monitoring solution pack, which allows me to monitor the vCenter services and the database services of the vCenter. I do have management VM alerts as well, so these are specific to management virtual machines, and I want to know if specific things are happening to my management stack for SDDC, such as VRA, VRO, NSX appliances, VROps appliances themselves, etc. And if they're powered off or rebooted, then I want to get alerted on. So I've created some alerts for them as well and put them in my little XML, which can be imported into a system whenever I want. Okay, good news. I just jumped into the admin console. So let me just go ahead and go on to the UI and see if I can show you some real action. So yeah, what I'll do is I'll basically have a blog post where I will put these alerts and you will be able to download them, and I will put in some instructions around how to import them and make sure that they are enabled in a policy. A good news is I can also give you a direct policy where I can have these alerts embedded with enabled, and you can just go ahead and import that policy in your environment and everything will get added, inclusive of alerts, symptoms, recommendations, and so on and so forth. So that's something which is available with VROps 6.2.1 if you ever get an opportunity to try. Okay, so Simon, I've spent 3 minutes trying to get into my lab, and I don't think it's happening today because it's not working.
No problem.
So
It's fine.
I will pause. We'll pause here, and we will take if there are any remainder questions. If not, then we will call it a day.
We don't have any other further questions, so I'll give it 10 seconds to anyone to raise their hand. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up.
All right. So if you need to read more about this session and the other sessions which we have done, then you can go to our blog. The links are right there on the screen, and you will get all the material you need. And this session is recorded and will be posted within the next 24 to 48 hours on my and Simon's blog. With that, nothing on the chat window.
Yep,
All right,
I think we're good.
So much. And Simon, any final comments from you?
No, that was great. Alert tuning is an important part of VROps. If you're going to get the value out of the product, you have to spend a little bit of time tailoring it to your environment. So, you know, one environment is going to generate alerts against certain things, another environment is going to do it differently. So there isn't necessarily one configuration that will work in all environments. You have to work with it a little bit. So yeah, this is a really critical part of managing your VROps estate.
Yep, absolutely. I think there's a question from Joe about what's the theme of the next webinar. That's a great question. Theme is VROps, for sure. We've not decided in terms of what would be the content which we'll be talking about. If you do have any specific questions or any specific areas you want us to talk about within VROps, then this is the opportunity. You can put that on a chat window or *6 yourself, unmute yourself and talk about it, and we'll be happy to take your comments and come out with a session. If you want to do that later on, then you can reach out to us on Twitter or LinkedIn or through our blogs, and we would be happy to accommodate any of your requests. All right, with that, I will stop the recording, and thank you all of you once again, and you guys have a great day.